Nothing to see here, folks. Move along now. Conspiracy theory. They don't want you to know that it's all true. So this creationism is a conspiracy thing has been going around, I guess, making its rounds. People responding to it. I don't have a lot to say about it. I'm not going to play the video and comment on, to the video per se. But I'm going to say some stuff because, everybody else has done it, so I have to do it. So this new creation clips guy, what's his name? Peter? Okay. Good old Pete. For the sake of Pete. Actually, I don't really have, like I said, I don't really have a lot to say. No, creationism isn't really a conspiracy. But it kind of acts sort of like one in a sense. But also no. So there's two big organizations that do creationism stuff. There's AIG, Answers in Genesis, Creationism Ministries, Discovery Institute, or whatever, things like this. And you can find, a lot of things that they've put on their website, a lot of articles that they've written about, how evolution is wrong and how, scientists are getting this wrong or that wrong or whatever. And we found out that this was fake and, and all these sort of things. And to legitimize their organization, they have a lot of people that were at some point a doctorate of some sort or had a degree, PhD or MD or MA or whatever. And they may have even written a few published peer-reviewed scientific papers. They were scientists, sort of. And what's interesting about that is if you examined the scientists that work for these places and looked at how many papers they had published, you'd find it wasn't that big of a number. And King Crocodile pointed this out in some video I can't remember now, but but the amount of papers that a graduate, I think it was an undergraduate, had published outweighed, whoever it was that he was looking at. So it was like, 40 to 20, it was like insane amounts, like it wasn't even close. Like they had like 100 or 40 or whatever the number was, but it was more. Now it's like one person, but still, I was like, yeah, that's bad. So could it be the case that the reason that scientists go into creationism is because they failed as a scientist and they don't know what to do? How do I make money? How do I make a living? And here comes Discovery Institute and offers them a nice paycheck for doing something relatively simple every X number of months or weeks or whatever, write something for us and, lie for us. Now you might say, oh, come on, they're not lying, but on these sort of websites, there's like a statement of faith, and you have to work for them. You have to, agree to certain stipulations. You have to support the Bible and the literal interpretation of the Bible according to them, no matter what. That's not science. That's cultish religious behavior. A scientist doesn't have to agree to anything at all to be a scientist. In fact, you and I are scientists. We just haven't written any peer-reviewed papers, more than likely. I know I haven't. I'll speak for myself. I haven't. I don't know how to do that. It's a complicated thing. But we're still scientists in a very basic way. We observe things, we draw conclusions from our observations, we catalog ideas, and we scrutinize them and try to test them. And we do this in everyday life without even really thinking about it. Now, we could do a lot better, but we do the activity of science just by existing. And you don't have to assume anything to do that. You just simply observe what is around you and you think about that and then you draw a conclusion. It's fairly straightforward. Now, if you want to get more complicated, you write it down, and you exchange notes with other people that are doing a similar thing, and you see what conclusions can be drawn. And this is how a very loose version of the scientific method. You could get a number of friends together and say, hey, look, let's go outside, touch some grass. Literally, let's look at the grass, or hey, let's look at the trees, and actually just study the bleep out of it. Like, write down everything that you observe. What's the bark like? What is inside of it? This goo. We know that's called sap. But you could start at ground level and just name things yourself. And you could come to some decent conclusions about what the tree is and how it behaves and whatever through just direct observation and some basic run-of-the-mill tests that any Joe Schmo can do. And not going to be anything breakthrough or extraordinary, but it's something we can all do. Creationists often say something like, sometimes, broadly speaking, I don't want to paint with too broad a brushstroke, but I've heard them say things like, science starts with the natural logical assumption. Science starts with naturalism, assumes naturalism. That's not the case, or at least it's not necessarily the case. You don't have to assume anything to engage in science. You simply write down your observation. Now, you are standing on the shoulders of others that came before you and using their work to step off of or step on so that you don't have to redo all the stuff that they've already done. And fair enough, you could say, well, maybe the system of science, this peer review that we talk about, that could go wrong. Something could go wrong there. Yeah, it could. And there's certainly problems with it, but that just means there's room for improvement. And it also means that, we can ask questions. And nothing is hidden, nothing is sacred, nothing is treated like gospel in science. However, in creationism, there is a singular specific goal. You must get to this conclusion. There has to be a God. This is a Judeo-Christian God. The Bible has to be literally interpreted, whatever that means, because that will vary from place to place. But, and so it has to be 6,000 years old. It has to be this, it has to be that. And so when you start with your conclusion and then you work backwards, of course you're going to reach your conclusion because you have to. And if you don't reach your conclusion, you're not a creationist anymore. If you found data that said, oh, this rock turns out to not be 6,000 years old, it's actually like 20,000 years old. Well, I guess my dating method must have been wrong. I guess the test I did must have been based on the wrong worldview. Something went wrong. Now, do creationists ever actually do any actual testing of their ideas? Not really. Sometimes they'll send in stuff to labs to be tested. I know that. I've heard that happens. Um, but I'm interested, like, where's the science? Like, I know you guys write a lot, but where's the actual science? What predictions can you make with creationism? It doesn't say, oh, well, a kind will produce its kind. That has no meaning to it. We don't know what kind is. It's not defined in any coherent manner. No one's done it. No one's taken the serious challenge that Aaron Ra and others have presented of the Phlebotomy challenge. It's explain what the bleep you mean by kind. Define it in a coherent way. That's never been done. It's not been done. And they've had debates with people that study evolution versus creationism. Of course, the creationists love to say evolutionist, which that's a word they made up. Why? Because it's convenient for them to label people in this way and then project their faults onto them. And it is a projection. It is a way to say you have your worldview and we have our worldview. Okay, so it's not a conspiracy per se, but there is money to be made from it. And hey, okay, that doesn't mean it's good, bad, or other. There's money to be made in real, actual science that actually does real things. And there's money to be made off of those that believe in this nonsense. Now, this, like I said, this video, not much to say. This different video, though, I thought that there was something interesting that I did want to talk about. This is reacting to Aaron Ra, zoology disproves Noah's flood. And here's Peter, and I found this very interesting. So this goes into the points I want to make.
Putting them together in this hybrid model that nobody is arguing for, right? So young Earth creationists think that the flood happened about 4,000 years ago. Ra thinks that the Earth is ancient, right? Billions of years old. But the problem is he's looking at this whole idea as if creationists are arguing that the flood happened 4,000 years ago on his timeline.
No, he's not. I listened to that video as well as all the videos that Aaron Ra has out, that all the different things to disprove the flood. No, he's looking at it as if it happened 4,000 years ago in the real timeline that we actually exist in, as opposed to the made up one that you believe is real. You guys, unless you're using a completely different system of how to measure time, are using the same time as Aaron Ra is, and that I am, and that I dare say all the world uses now. The amount of time that it takes, to complete a full orbit around the sun, that's a year. 4,000 years ago, there was not a worldwide flood. Period. End of story. There wasn't one. Because we have writings from before that time. We have evidence of civilizations from before that time. We have trees. We have X, Y, and Z things that could not exist if there had been a large-scale flood, because it would have wiped out all those things. It would have been a hard reset on everything. Humanity, civilization, every species. It would have been a giant reset, and it would be noticeable. And we'd have ample evidence that it was true. We don't have that because it didn't happen. What you're saying is, no, Aaron Ra, he gets it wrong. He thinks it happened in his timeline, whatever the hell that means. No, he doesn't. He's saying, look, you guys think it's 4,000 years. So I'm going to go with that. And 4,000 years ago, here's what was really going on, according to everything that we know about reality, which I guess you guys have to ignore because the civilizations that we know about can't exist in, quote, your timeline. So he's using reality. You guys aren't. That's what's really going on.
And that's not what we're actually arguing. Young Earth creationists argue, I mean, most of us, I think, would probably agree that the flood, post-flood boundary is actually about 65 million years ago on his timeline.
Okay, so according to him now, so the flood happened 65 million years ago, but only if you're using Aaron Ra's timeline, reality. So what the hell is going on 65 million years ago? Well, that's like dinosaurs are around. And you know what isn't around 65 million years ago? Humans, as we know them today. Or, well, I mean, I don't even know what the bleep we would be back then, but we're not us. We're like some like rodent or something. I don't know. There, and of course, it ends in a mass extinction event, which is comet, meteorite, whatever that hit us, not a flood. So the dinos were around. So if there had been a giant flood during that time, there would have been a giant reset of everything at that time. From then to now, everything starting from basically scratch, I don't know if we could get to where we are today if everything reset that moment. Because the problem is, you're also resetting whatever the bleep humans would be back then. Let's see if we can find out. Humans didn't exist 65 million years ago. Non-avian dinosaurs went extinct at that time. It took about 65 million years for human to appear on Earth. So there wasn't humans. So then there would have been no one to build the damn boat. So he's not using... I don't know what you guys are on about when you're saying this, but this is the sort of thinking that comes out of creationism. Is, well, he just misunderstands our argument. We have different timelines. Yeah, he has a real timeline. You have a made-up one that is incoherent. 4,000 years ago on Earth, there's major development, early civilizations, the Mesopotamia region, in modern-day Iraq, the beginning of writings, the Bronze Age, domestication of animals, horses, chickens, and the start of recorded history as you know it. That's what was going on 4,000 years ago. And yeah, there were humans, and they looked like, well, pretty much like we look. So, even if you move the flood to 65 million years ago, that doesn't help your case even a little bit.
So the problem here is we're not all using the same timeline. He has a timeline, we have a timeline, and even though we can be talking about the same date, 4,000 years ago, they don't actually match up because we disagree with the way in which they date things.
Okay, now this is the point that I wanted to highlight. We disagree on the way they date things. They who. Now remember, this guy said, hey, look, creationism isn't a conspiracy theory. And he also said, that basically he said evolution's not a conspiracy theory either, because it's just that they're using it. They have a different worldview. So Christians have a different worldview than you guys do, because somehow they draw the same conclusions as all the other scientists when they agree with the age of the Earth or the age of the universe or biological evolution. All three of those things are things that a creationist has to deny. Well, young Earthers have to deny the age. Old Earthers don't, but they have to deny biological evolution. So there's like three different. There's cosmology that must be denied. Then there's the age of the Earth, which is, well, part of cosmology, I guess. And biology and biological evolution, you have to ignore those things to be a creationist and be a young Earth creationist. And to believe that there was a global flood, you have to ignore a bleep ton of science. Just like it's ridiculous how much science you have to ignore. The there is not enough water to cover the entire Earth. So the amount of rain that you'd have to cover the entire Earth would destroy the Earth. Like, it's just, nothing works about it. It can't happen. And then the waters recede. Where the bleep does the water go? And they have all sorts of crazy nonsense that they believe in about where the water goes. It goes into the Earth, it goes into space, whatever, all this. And it's like nothing that they have is supported by any actual real science at all. Instead, it's supported by made up nonsense because they have to get to their conclusion. So they cannot admit that it was a localized flood at best. And I'm sure 4,000 years ago, there probably was a flood somewhere. That's happened. Probably, it's not a hard bet to make. I don't know when or where it would have happened, but yeah, sure. But flood stories are kind of common. We see this in literature from place to place and time to time. And then the creationists will say, aha, that's proof that it really happened. No, that's proof that we write about catastrophes. And if you've noticed a flood, then that's something that you write about, and you might exaggerate it, or it might seem like the whole world is underwater when it's just your land and you don't know anything about anywhere else. And it's like, well, why are all the stories similar? Well, they're not that similar, but some of them have similarities. Well, because we tend to write and make stories that are similar. So the alternate explanation is humans came up with stories based on what they saw, and because we have similar ideas to each other, broadly speaking, we come to ideas that seem similar. This is like, it's not worldwide. Or maybe they knew about the right. Anyways, but it's interesting, don't you think? I mean, yeah.
And as a result, he's basically using an old Earth conception of time to prove that the Earth is old, which is...
Okay, so he's using an old Earth conception of time to prove that the Earth is old. No, he is not doing that at all in his video. At no point did he ever do that. So that would be an example of circular reasoning had he done it, but he didn't do it. And the fact of the matter is, you have absolutely no timestamp to show that. So this is just false. I don't think this guy really knows logic. He knows of the logical fallacy, but that's not enough to know logic. Just learning the fallacies isn't good enough.
Just kind of, as I said earlier, a fallacy.
Okay, so the point is that I want to make here is that the type of thinking on display here smacks of conspiracy type of thoughts. It couldn't just be one single person that killed JFK. It had to be whatever your story is. It couldn't be that all these UFO sightings are just weird stuff like, planes that we're testing or weather balloons or just us not knowing what the hell we're looking at. No, it's got to really be for real aliens that somehow the government is hiding from us all, because that's what I want my conclusion to be. When you are stuck with a conclusion, that's everything is going to filter back to that conclusion. That is, in essence, conspiratorial thinking. In his other video, he said, they're starting with a different worldview. How do you know that? How do you know what worldview they're starting with? See, you're assuming that they have a different worldview than you. They might very well be a Christian, just not a young earth creationism Christian. So if you and this other person are both starting with Christ idea, then how is it they have a different worldview? I'll tell you how. They didn't believe or buy into the creationism ideas that you did. Why did you start believing that stuff? A lot of various reasons, I would guess. I'm going to assume some things about Pete here. Hope he doesn't mind being called Pete. Peter. Was that his name now? I did say for the sake of Pete, right? Am I wrong about his name? All of a sudden, my brain says I'm wrong. I know I'm not wrong, so I'm going to go with it. I don't care. If that's not his name, it is now. Pete and Pete. So, you think somehow, so you were exposed to these ideas like, from your parents or whatever, you went to church, and you didn't, and then, so now that you're a young man in his teens, I don't know, he's like 20 looking, 20-ish, maybe 18-ish, I don't know. 20-ish. I think he's probably, maybe 24, 22-ish, I don't know. Maybe younger. I don't know. He's younger than I am. Anyways, and instead of looking at the things that could disprove his ideas, he has looked into things that prove his ideas. Instead of trying to learn actual science, he's decided that he must be right. His ideas of God must be right. He can't be wrong. And this is the only way and the right way to view it. And if he's wrong about this, then there can't be a God, and that's too scary to contemplate. So this is it. It's Dogma 101. That's conspiratorial type of thinking. He probably was indoctrinated into it. That's what I would guess. I could be wrong about that. Like I say, I'm making some assumptions, broad brush assumptions about the man. The argument should be what matters, of course. He doesn't have any argument. Not any valid or sound argument, at least. I don't even think he offered a valid argument. But nonetheless, certainly not sound and certainly not scientific. If you were to learn about science and not worry what you think the Bible says, you would come to the same conclusions as all the other scientists have on this matter. The only reason you don't is because you are committed to this belief system. You will not learn about reality until you let go of this belief system. That doesn't mean letting go of God, per se, but it does mean letting go of this version of God. And that frightens him. That idea frightens him to his core. And I can say that with pretty good confidence because I've dealt with people that have all sorts of weird beliefs over the time of doing my channel. People get mad, they get angry, they get hostile, they say just complete, utter stuff that makes no sense at all except to them. And I remember, I forget who it was exactly, but I had this conversation with the person. I was like, look, I got them to agree what a species was. Something that can't, like, if it can't produce an offspring, then it's a new species. Like, if it has sex with something else, with its, like, then it's a new thing, right? Like, Like a jackass is not like its own thing. Like it is its own thing. Like it can't. There's only one way to produce that. Basically, it's a new species at that point. But so I had lizards that I knew about that were in California, and one went north and the other went south. And they started from the same spot. They were this one type of lizard. They all looked the same. They moved. One went north, one went south, and they tracked them for however many years. And the ones that went north changed color, and the ones that went south changed color over time because they were adapting to their new environments. And when they brought them back together, they looked very different. And they no longer could mate with each other, or if they could mate with each other, they did not produce any offspring. And I said, so is this an example of evolution? And even though he had agreed with everything, because he knew that I had all the info I could show him, and I said that, he was like, no, that doesn't count. Doesn't count. Because you have to make all these assumptions, blah, 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 and that was it. And it's like, that's it. You're done. Because you want to believe X is true, and that's it. Science is legitimate. Science isn't about going in with some assumption or belief. It's about discovering how things really work for real. And if there is a God, then it would align with reality. The early Christians wanted to figure out how God did stuff. Like the early Christians that started doing science were like, hey, let's figure out how God did this. And they just started, writing down stuff and trying to figure out stuff. And what happened was when Darwin introduced his theory of evolution, some Christians like C.S. Lewis and others were like, this is a threat to Christianity. And they got scared. And they started arguing against it. Not using science, using arguments. It's only later that people started making up things and calling it science and calling it creationism or intelligent design in efforts to conceal the real truth from themselves and from others. Sounds like a conspiracy, but it's an open conspiracy. That is to say, they're not hiding this from us. We know that they're lying. That is to say, they're telling us stuff that's not true. Maybe they believe it, so it's not a lie in that sense. It's just, but they're saying stuff that's not true. I don't know if they're lying or not, but I think it's easier to call it a lie because it's just, when it's so blatantly false, I don't know what else to call it. You're not being honest. You're not telling us the truth. You're making up bullshit. And some of them have to know. But they're committed to it. They've sunk time and energy into this belief system. They get paid money for it. And this guy doesn't, obviously. He's doing a YouTube channel. He probably believes his own bullshit. But he has a goal in mind. Get subs, get views, Maybe he wants to turn it into a thing where he gets paid for it. I don't know. Hey, I don't have a problem with any of that. I have a problem with him spreading ideas that are not true. I look at his comment section, I see people going, yeah, good video, yeah, God bless, God, and saying absolutely nothing. Nothing of value is being added. The only ones disagreeing are the pesky atheists. And sadly, not enough Christians who are fine with evolution are in there telling them that they're wrong. For whatever reason, the atheist and or skeptic tends to be the one that is super concerned with defending science, even though we all should be in that project together. Christians, Muslims, Indians, Indians, whatever. Hindus, Indians, yes, that's our new religion. Yeah, whatever. Lobsterists, whatever. We should all be concerned with defending science because it's freaking real. If you tie your God to something that's not real and say, my God exists because evolution doesn't work, guess what? Your God doesn't exist anymore. If you tie your God into having a 6,000-year-old Earth or universe, your God doesn't exist anymore. And I will never, ever, 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 ever believe in that version of God because it's impossible. Because it's not true. The universe is about 13 billion years. Might be older, actually. Who knows? I don't know. Might be maybe a little bit younger, but it's probably going to be older, if anything. And the Earth is, 4.54 billion years old, give or take. Those are the real, and that's reality. That's the world that we have for real. That's way cooler than, God did it all. Now, how did they get to 6,000? And some people know this, not everybody does. So some idiot added up the ages of the various different people. There's genealogies given in the Old Testament. And Adam and whoever else lived to ridiculous numbers. And some idiot added up all those numbers. Guess what happens if you do this? You don't get to 6,000. You get to a number higher than 6,000. But in case Pete listens to this, I don't think he will, but in case he does, I got a question. How old was Adam and Eve when they were made? Because they were made as like teenagers or adults. How old were they? They were made old. That is to say, Adam was made as if his body was already, let's say, 18 years old. It's kind of weird, but whatever. So God could have also made the world, and the world is just, really super old. Why would he do it? No idea. But he could have done it. Sure. Yeah, I made it in 6 days, but when I made it super old. Because I just wanted to mess with people. God's kind of a trickster like that. He's got a sense of humor. But if Adam could be made old, other things can be made old. Sure, why not? We all just popped into existence last Thursday because God did that. Because it could. Sure, why not? There's no way to say that isn't, right? But the other question that I would have is, okay, so let's say, again, I'm just saying 18 because we don't know. It doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't tell us how Adam and Eve looked. Like, no physical description is given of these people. No location, Garden of Eden. Where is that on the planet Earth? We don't know. Apparently, it's still around because there's a gate that's being guarded by a guardian angel with flaming swords or something. So somebody should have found that by now, I would think, and be like, hey, there's this giant gate here with this weird thing standing with a giant flaming sword. I'd love to see what's beyond it, but this thing's preventing me from doing it. I think we would have found it by now. That would be an awesome confirmation of the Bible being true. But anyways, so how old was he? And here's the thing. Like, okay, so his body is created at the age of 18, even though he's basically not even a second old, and I don't know how long they're in the Garden of Eden. Doesn't say. Because it seems like, they're there, like they just got created, and before you know it, they're out of there, like within a few days. That's what it seems like. But it doesn't, maybe they were there for years. Maybe they were there for centuries before they screwed up. Maybe they were there for billions of years and the rest of the planet evolved and the meteor hit and killed the dinosaurs and they're chilling out there and all history is, and then when they get kicked out, see, Cain now has a woman to go marry that's not his sister or his, because there's all these people that are around, because the rest of the world was developing around them while they were chilling out in the Garden of Eden. Why not? Because it doesn't say that didn't happen. It doesn't say how long they were there. But at any rate, but here's the problem I have. Okay, so Adam, let's say Adam was 18, but he's not 18 technically because he's like a few days old. So however long he lived, I want to say 900. I don't remember now. How old was Adam when he died? What was it? 930 years. Yeah, sure. Why not? 930 years. A ridiculously old age. Just ridiculous. But wouldn't we have to subtract 18 from that? Because technically, he's not 930. Like, that's his physical age, but not his actual age. Because he's like only been around for, let's say, a few weeks, right? Before they got kicked out. Let's say a month at most. It seems like a few days. I'm going to say a month at most. So he's like 1 month old in real time, but his body's at 18. So when he dies at 930, that's just the age of his body. His actual age is minus 18, so he's actually I can't do basic math. What's 912? He's actually 912. So wouldn't that then screw up the time frame of the young Earth, given that you have to add all these numbers together to get the young Earth? And when you do add all the numbers together, you get a number that's bigger than 6,000. So how do you guys just round down because you're lazy? Show me the math. And then there's another problem. There's 2 sets of genealogies in the Old Testament. Which one do you use? So, of course, why think that they lived this long at all? There's no reason other than pure dogma. People don't live that long. So where is that number coming from? Now I thought, well, I have a very simple explanation. Judaism, Jewish people back in the day, maybe still today, loved numerology. Absolutely loved numerology. And different numbers had different meanings. And so it might be that the number 930 means something to the Jewish person that we've lost over time. That's a far easier explanation. Other explanations could be that the number system is different than ours, or we just did it wrong, copy error. Could be there's numerous possibilities. You know what would be great? Given that he supposedly lived so long, couldn't we find his bones? Couldn't we find any of these ancient people's bones? Because they lived to like almost 1,000 years into Earth's history, and if the world's only 4,000 years old, those bones should still be around, right? But nobody's found them. That's weird. I mean, maybe we don't know where to look, but oh well. Anyways, so I guess that's really, because I can't really cover the science. Other people that know the science can cover that. The logic of creationism is all I can comment on. And you have to kind of think that all the scientists are just wrong somehow. They somehow all got it wrong because they're all using the wrong worldview, even though there's no way for you to know that they're using the wrong worldview other than just assert that that's what's going on. And that is conspiratorial thinking. Creationism in and of itself might not be a conspiracy, broadly speaking, but you're using the mental gymnastics that you must employ to remain a creationist certainly line up with the sort of thinking that conspiracy theorists often employ. They use base 60. Yeah, I've heard that or read that at some point that they might have used base 6012. So, that would be 80 years maybe, or 930 months or something. So, yeah. But yeah, even 80, that I don't think people lived that long back then either. But I suppose it's possible. At least that's more, reasonable number. But yeah, but they insist that they have to be right about these ideas. That's dogmatic, not scientific. And if you ask your creationists questions about the Bible, like difficult questions, they don't have answers. But then I've found this to be true for many Christians. Christians tell us, usually, that the Bible is the most important book in the world. Okay, who published it? Like, what's this? I got a phone call. Spam. No, I don't care. Stop calling me! Anyways. The prime factorization of 930 is that. Cool. That must mean something. No, the bones were destroyed in the flood. Wait, okay, then Eden was destroyed in the flood, right? That's why we can't find it. But then why put an angel to guard Eden if you know it's going to get destroyed? That seems silly. And I think it says that it will be there for all time, too. Let's see. The cherubim or cherubs. Okay. Angel Raphael. What? Come on, tell me who it is. A cherubim with flaming sword at the east of the Garden of Eden guarded. Doesn't say that he removed it before the flood, so I guess that cherubim died in the flood, man. It's pretty messed up, but whatever. Yeah, sure. But we would have an accurate reset button that would be obvious if there had been a worldwide flood, even 5 million years ago, whatever, or 4,000 years ago. There'd be evidence for it, which there isn't. There wasn't a worldwide flood. Biological evolution is real. The Earth is not 6,000 years old. The universe is not 6,000 years old. And you guys are stuck with these ideas that aren't even biblical in nature because somebody said that they're true and you decided to believe them rather than investigate them for real. Beyond just not, publish the Bible. Yeah, like who published your version of the Bible? They don't know. Who published it? There's different publishers of different Bibles. So which one published yours? Which version of the Bible are you using? Who assembled that? Yeah, who's behind it? Who's behind the New International Version? Or King James, we know. But how did King James decide to do it? Actually, it wasn't him that did it. It was people that he appointed. So who were those people? Where was any manuscript found? When and by whom? They don't know. They don't know. How was canon decided by who and when and where? They don't know. These are questions that if I thought that this was the most important book in the world, I would know everything there was to know about this book. I would know stuff like that. Some believers can't even name the 12 disciples. So, it's like, it just proves to me you guys don't really think it's the most important book in the world because you don't treat it that way. But I cannot take seriously the idea that this stuff happened literally. I can take it as metaphor, maybe. I think that these are just so stories. I think that this would have been more honest had they said once upon a time rather than in the beginning. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, God made the universe. But if you want, a more scientific sort of Bible, there are holy books that get things closer. The Hindus have an age that's ridiculous, but at least it's closer. But I happen to know, just offhand, of a holy book that's pretty close. This says about 13 billion years ago, there was a speck of something. We don't know why it was there, but it was. Where has been a question for ages, the answer is the speck could be floating. But floating in what? Well, it goes on from there. But that first line is pretty darn scientific as far as the age of the universe. So I would say that book is closer than all the other holy books. And there, later on in the book, there is at least one giant paragraph of pure science that you won't find in any other book. So if you're going to go with the holy book and think that it's true, you might as well use that one. You guys know what the name of it is, so I don't need to. Lobsteress! It's a lobsteress! No one's unpacked it yet! What do you mean in the stream? No, I want to talk about the lobsteress in the stream. No!